You know, it seems like lately a lot of different things have happened in our lives, and it a lot of times, well, Diane was talking about fear and you know how we face our fears and things that you know we all are going to have things in our lives that make us scared. You know, nobody gets away from that. But the thing about it is, God keeps trying to tell us not to fear. And I was, you know, He laid that on my heart this week, and I kind of went back and forth on what I was going to talk about, and I realized something that really has always gotten me, and it still does. It still gets me, and that's snakes. I know I've told you about snakes and stuff, but when I was in California, deer season starts in August, and it runs through the end of September, and that's snake season out there. And there are lots and lots. I mean, I've killed a lot of snakes when I was deer hunting. But one thing that I've noticed that when I went out there, if I start thinking about snakes and not hunting, all I do is think about snakes. And every step, I'm looking at the ground instead of everywhere else. And so I had to somehow figure out how to get past it. Now, I'm not saying don't ever think about it, because I know there's snakes out there and I got to kill them every once in a while. I've made a point of it, though. If I see a snake, I kill that snake, because I don't want to walk back down here thinking, where'd that snake go to now? You know. But one thing I realized is a lot of times when rattlesnakes, they'll sound off before, you know, you get too close to them, as long as you're not stinking too much, you know, and they'll see or hear you before you ever see them, and they'll rattle. You know, and so that was a good thing, but some don't make any noise at all. You know, if it's a little bit cool morning, they may be just holed up and just, you know, not going to do anything. And so it's one of those things, and I guess it's like life. You know, God says in the Bible, 300, well, it's a bunch of different people have said different things, but in different ways, God has said over 365 different places not to fear. Okay? It's stated different ways. It's saying, you know, some places it says not to worry, some places it says do not fear, fear not. You know, there's a lot of different ways it's stated, but it is the single most reiterated statement by God to us. And I thought a lot about that, because, you know, we live in this world. And this world is a scary place sometimes. There's no way around it. You're not going to get through life without being, like, scared. But knowing that God has got it, knowing that no matter what happens, that God is with you, is the reason we can do what we do as Christians. And I think that sets us apart from the rest of the world. You know, what Diane went through is all those things that the different Christians did in the Bible, and how they had to face things. And I don't know really how they all faced it, but I do know that there's a very important part, and I think it directly goes to our hearts as humans, as people, and that Jesus came as a person. Jesus came as a person. He felt everything we feel, and it was important that that happened. And before, the night before he was going to be crucified, he prays to God. He prays to God that if you could take this away, that would be great. But your will is what he says. You know, and if we think about that for a minute, I mean, he had to know at this point when he's praying to God that was not going to be, that was going to be an awful thing. That was going to be a horrible thing, and he had to face it. And you know what? In the world today, there's a lot of things going on that we have to face, you know. And each year it's different. It's one thing or another, but it's always something that we have to face. But here's the thing. As Christians, we're not to fear, even though we have that feeling of fear, right? And it's easier said than done. Do not fear. But here's the difference. When we go to that place, as long as we don't, and I read this as a really good thing. Fear gives us amnesia of God's word. Fear always, you think about that for a minute. As soon as you get afraid, you forget what God has told us. You forget what God has done for us. You forget all the history of things that have happened to us, and then all of a sudden, it has to come back at some point. As a Christian, you have to remember to always, it says never worry about anything, pray about everything. Start to pray right then. And when you do, you realize that, wait a minute, and God will give it back to you, all that history that you've forgotten. The amnesia goes away, and you realize that God's got this. God is going to take care of us. We don't have to fear. But see, you know, who was it? President Franklin D. Roosevelt said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. And I guess that goes back to the thought of fear. What does fear do for us? I read another place where fear doesn't help us in any way. And in fact, fear just takes us away. We don't live better if we have fear. We live worse. We have all these other secondary problems from having fear. So, and in some cases, and in lately especially with all this stuff going on, a lot of people have just stopped living because of fear. And so what we need to do is remember that God says not to fear, but here's the thing, the devil wants us to fear. That's how he gets us. Because, like I said, I read this little thing that said that we get amnesia when we fear, and that's the first thing that happens. We forget what God has told us. And so the devil definitely wants us to fear because he knows that fear will cause the amnesia, and he'll be able to use us. He'll be able to point us in a direction that he wants us to go in. And you know, if we think about it, what does fear cause? Well, one of the biggest things it causes is anger. You know, the reason I say that is because I know firsthand that when I start to get afraid of something, I get angry. I want to, you know, it's a fight or flight kind of thing that we build up. You know, we're gonna either run away or we're gonna stand up against it. You know, and the way I grew up, we stood up against it. You know, and so all of a sudden how do you do that though? You get angry, and you lose what you should have, which is God's blessings, which is what God has done. God's blessings are really important. We need to always remember what God's blessings are. The things that he's done in our lives already to prove that he's still going to be with us throughout whatever's to come. You know, Peter got out of the boat and he walked on water, but he took his eyes off of Jesus for a second. But here's the thing, Jesus came over and got him up and everything was fine. And so for us to start to fear things is okay. Peter feared what was happening. He went out there and the waves were coming up and the wind was blowing, and all of a sudden when he took his eyes off of Jesus, he saw that. And we're all going to see that. But God came over, Jesus came over, and he lifted him up, put him back in the boat, and everything is fine. And so in our lives, we go through times where we're going to have that profound thought of fear. We're going to have that. There's no way around it. We're going to have it. So what do? We remember that's going to give us amnesia if we allow it. But if we get past that and realize that God says that we don't have to fear, that we should not fear, that he's got it, that all we need to do is pray to him, talk to him, let him fill our hearts, then we're okay. You know, a while back I did a message, and one of the big parts of that message was that we're only as weak as our strongest friend. We're only as weak as our strongest friend. Y'all know how that works, you know. If you're standing around, we had a little poodle when that's a long story. But we had a little poodle. My dad, this lady said, I've got this poodle. We had a ranch, right? We had a great big German Shepherd and a Malamute, and this lady gives my dad this poodle, little gray poodle, right? And so he brings it home, and this dog thought it was a monster. It would start fights everywhere. And the funny thing was, this big German Shepherd would finish every single one of them. But the thing about it is, he didn't know any better. He just went out there and did it. And I think what we're supposed to do is, he didn't have any fear at all. He knew that his strongest friend was that German Shepherd. Actually, I don't know for sure he knew that strongest friend was his German Shepherd. I kind of think he thought he was the strong one in the bunch. But that German Shepherd would take care of him, you know, and God's going to take care of us. Jesus is our strongest friend, and he will not let us go. He has his hand on us all the time. The only funny thing is, a lot of times we take our eyes off him and don't realize he's still right there. And so right now, in the way we're living, the way everything is, I know there's a lot of fear in the world. And there shouldn't be, but there is. And the best way that we can not only help ourselves, but help others to get through fear is not to be that person that accepts it, not to be a person that reiterates it. In other words, oh, well, this is bad, this is horrible, oh, no, we're not going to, no. Everything's okay. God's got this. We're going to move forward instead of back behind. Half full, half empty kind of thing. It says in the Bible, and it's really an important part of the message today. It says that if God's on our side, who could ever stand against us? If God's on our side, who could ever stand against us? And it also says this. It says that for us to actually fear and forget God, to go completely off the deep end, in other words. The only reason that we would never come back to God is that we don't believe God. We don't believe in Him. That's the only way we would stay out there. We don't believe that God has this. We don't believe that we're going to make it to heaven. We don't believe about all the things that have happened that should put us where we should be, but instead we're off where the devil wants us to be. And so just remember that. You can't fear. We can't fear. Of course, we're going to have that. I'm not saying you're not going to be in the world, you're not going to have trouble. God never said we're not having trouble. But He said, don't worry, I've got it. And if we put it back in that situation and whatever's happening, we know that, we have that confidence that He is taking care of it, then we don't have to worry. People always think, what am I going to lose? What am I, being a Christian, how am I, how's God going to take care of us? If I do all this, what's God going to do for us? And the thing about it is God made it really clear that He's there for us by sending His Son, Jesus. And Jesus tells us in Mark 10:29 through 30, it says this. Jesus says, let me assure you that no one who ever has given up anything, homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, children, or property for love of me, Jesus Christ, and to tell others the good news, who won't be given back 100 times over. Now you just think about that. Yeah, we feel like, oh, what are we doing this for? Or why are we doing this? Jesus, you can't outgive God. You cannot outgive God. And the guy told me that one time, and I realized that is so true. And I can tell you firsthand experiences that, no matter what happens, if I'm serving God, I know God is going to take care of me. I know that there's times when problems happen. But you know what? If we look at the whole page and not just center on that one spot, it's bad. If we look at the whole page and we see what's really going on, we realize, oh wait, oh no, He's got it. It's okay. You ever watched a movie where like somebody's complaining and saying all this stuff, and you can see the whole movie, so you can see what's over here, and this guy can't see it, and you're saying, but look over there, that's and he never does see that, does he? And then you're just mad because he never saw it. But here's the thing, we know that we have a gift of God's blessings, and we can see what He's done. The funny thing is, the Israelites were wandering around in the wilderness for however many years, and it should have been like a very short trip, but instead they were there for 40 years. The whole time they were doing this, and God is very clear about what was going on, they kept losing their faith. They kept saying they would get, where's the water? They get water. Where's the food? They get food. But they couldn't store it. They had to keep walking out and doing stuff without food, trusting that God's going to give them food later. And they kept complaining. In fact, at one point in time, He gives them this stuff called manna. And He says you can eat all you want, but you can't store it. And a lot of these guys, they went, oh, who cares? It doesn't matter what God says. We'll store it anyway. And it rots and it gets all bad. But that's how we treat God all the time, is that we don't realize that He says, no, do it this way, and then everything will be good. And it was poor people in the wilderness, and actually, who was the poor person? It was poor Moses, because Moses went out there and he did everything he was supposed to do. He tried his best to get these people through the wilderness, and no matter what happened, there was problems, and it ended up, Moses never made it to the promised land in this world. He did make it to the promised land in heaven, but he never made it. Joshua led everybody in. And that's kind of a statement of how things go in this world, you know. Things don't seem always right, but they are. And God makes it right. And I'll tell you why he makes it right. Because he gives us the promise that we win in the end. That we are looking at our life as if this is all we have. We're not realizing that life is like this, in this world, is like a grain of sand. And if we look out there at all that sand, that's not even close to eternity that we will spend with God. One grain of sand, and you compare it to that, and we're still not there yet. There's still more sand. Think about that. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, because this basket's not the one we're supposed to live. And so we need to remember that no matter what goes on here, God's got it. John 14, 2 and 3, it says this. There are many, this is Jesus. This is Jesus telling his disciples and us, don't worry. Don't worry. He says, there are many homes up there where my Father lives, and I am going to prepare them for your coming. I am going to prepare them for your coming. He's telling us, hey, don't worry, I've got this. And not only that, when you get there, you got a home up there. He says, when everything is ready, then I will come and get you, so that you can always be with me where I am. If this weren't so, hear this. If this weren't so, I would tell you plainly. Why would he come and do all that and lie to us? That makes no sense. But what does make sense is that Jesus told us the truth. He said that he's there and that he prepares a place for us. All of us. Finally, Proverbs 29:25 says this. Fear of man is a dangerous trap, but to trust in God means safety. Don't let this world tell you things that aren't true. Remember, God's got it. And not only remember that God's got it, but shine that out to others so they know that God's got it. They can see it through our actions. And that's more wonderful than anything else, is our actions and how we do it. Because James, in the book of James, says that, faith without action is no faith at all. So we all need to always be going out and doing and showing Jesus. I'll tell you, the very first step towards doing that is to make sure that we always pray. Whether we're worried or not, any time of the day we should pray. We should always be with God. I said earlier that, God's always with us, but are we with him? Well, how we get with him is by praying. And so right now, that's what I'm going to do. And if you don't want to follow along, that's what we'll do all together. Dear Lord, I know that everything that happens for a reason. Sometimes it's beyond us why. Sometimes it makes us fear that maybe the coming isn't going to be what you say. But we know right now, we know that you've got this. We know that your hand is on us, that you are always with us, that you will never forsake us, because that is your word, and your word is true. Your word is and always will be. And we need to always remember that you say that we win in the end. That you say as long as we're with you, that we are as strong as lions. So be with us, dear Lord. Be with us. Forgive our sins. Lead, guide, and direct us throughout this world and all the lives. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.